All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today's lecture should be pretty brief and perhaps a little bit more casual than some of our previous lectures. There's no agenda slide, no learning outcome slide. Really, this topic is more advice than actual instruction. And it's one of my favorite lectures to give because it's where I genuinely start to see the light bulbs in each of your heads turn on a little bit brighter. But this advice is personal. This is something that has taken me several years to learn, and as a matter of fact, I actually didn't learn this on my own. This advice was given to me in almost its exact format from one of my old bosses, and it has stayed with me for several years. And so I don't expect that just throwing a couple of slides on the screen and saying a few words will mean that you all have learned this. This is something that is learned over time, and really it's learned with some real-world experience that is simply has to become part of who you are. I'm still working on making it a part of who I am, and if I'm being completely honest. So for some of you, maybe this is already a part of who you are. And so perhaps for you, this is just a sort of continuation. But for me, particularly starting off as a young designer and photographer and just graphics industry professional, this was not a part of my toolkit. But it has very quickly become the most important tool that I am able to pull out. And I've titled this lecture People Over Process for a reason. So let's jump in, but today we're gonna do away with the agenda slide and the learning objective slide simply because, as I mentioned, this is more of an active learning topic. I just want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this one. To start us off, you may have heard this phrase. It's turtles all the way down. But in case you haven't, I'll sort of give you the TLDR, the too long didn't read on it. Effectively, it is an expression of the problem of infinite regress. And infinite regress is a philosophical concept to describe a series of entities where each entity depends on its predecessor in what is called a recursive principle. So, for example, you rely on your boss, who relies on their boss, who maybe relies on the CEO, who relies on the shareholders, who relies on the banks, who rely on their customers, and so on. There are several variants of this, but all of them originate from a Hindu myth. But what I have come to understand this by is it's people all the way down. And understanding this turn of phrase in this way has ultimately, I think, made me a better person and a better designer to embrace the fact that it's really people all the way down. Meaning that no matter how many times you ask why, no matter how many times you ask, well, what's driving that decision? Or why are things the way they are? The answer will always come back to people. Now, this doesn't mean that process is not important. It doesn't mean that being good at project management or being good in Figma or being good in Adobe, it doesn't mean that any of those things are not important. But if you use what I call the 80-20 rule, whether it's in work, life, or really in whatever context, if you use the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time, think about the people, and then 20% of the time, think about the process. When I'm doing work, either as a project manager or as a designer or a photographer, if I'm not considering people at least 80% of the time, then there's going to be some deficit in the output of that work. There's going to be something that I missed. It's not going to be received the way that I want it to. So whether I'm doing work in Adobe or hiring a project team or conducting research or making a presentation to shareholders, 80% of the time, think about the people. And then let that drive other things like the process. Don't let the process drive the people. And by the way, this is true with your users and your customers as well. I mentioned in an earlier lecture that every organization has a client. As graphics professionals, our clients are the people who we are trying to communicate with. Generally, the client is not the people who hired us. And you need to think about them, your customers, outside of the solution that you're trying to design. A lot of the creative work that we all do, we only view our clients through the lens of a solution that we've already made or a product that they already use. I hear this several times a semester. I'm making the Spotify of dating apps for my capstone. But true empathy for your clients, customers, and users truly only comes when you begin to think of them as having lives and motivations and needs and goals that honestly have absolutely nothing to do with whether you're creating your design or really whatever it is that you're creating. They may have elected to use your design, but they could just as well elect something else, right? So it's people all the way down. There are 5 things I would tell you are very important when it comes to being or becoming the type of person that is invaluable to a company or even just to a team or maybe even your family. Whatever you ultimately go on to do for work. These 5 traits really work to make you a valuable team member, no matter the role you play within that team. Number 1 is consistency. Learn to be consistent in how you approach problems and solutions. All the methods that you learn here in my class, all of the tools that you obtain here at ASU, and all of the skills they'll all certainly matter, and all the techniques that you pick up out in the real world, all of those are great to use as frameworks and jumping off points because they help you to be consistent. Constraints are not a bad thing. Hopefully, by this point, you've hopefully learned that constraints can actually be an asset to your work. Embrace those constraints because they can be productive constraints. But the more consistent you are with how you approach your designs, the more credible you are going to be in this industry. The next one is simply the ability to listen. Now, I say simply. This was one of the hardest ones for me to learn personally. Having the ability to make space for other people, for their ideas, to make a safe place for questions. The ability for someone to communicate to you has more to do with how you listen than with how they're actually communicating. Now, that sounds kind of twisted, but here's what I mean. If you don't make space for people to think, and you don't make space for them to communicate, it messes up their ability to even execute the communication. And if you don't understand what this means now, you will certainly understand it eventually. Like I said, it took me a very, very long time to learn this. I thought that there had to be more back and forth. I had to give my perspective and my ideas. But the more that I just listen, it improves how other people think. It's literally the coolest superpower because it's the laziest superpower you can have. Make space. It will improve how others around you think, and that is an amazing superpower. And the third thing, this sort of goes along with the ability to listen. Embrace the goals of others. If you can learn to embrace the goals of your project manager, stakeholders, obviously your users or customers, perhaps less obviously, maybe software engineers, you will become an invaluable, essential collaborator who will be the designer or the photographer or the VFX artist or the software engineer that every coworker loves to work with. Not because they can run all over you and make all of the decisions for you, but because you understand that they have constraints and goals too. Just like you do. Just like every creative team does. But they're constrained by other things. And if you care about that, you'll become an essential collaborator. The fourth thing is building credibility. When you get your first job in the field that you're studying, whatever industry it might be in, my first design job was as an interior designer at Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. I was studying graphic and web design. Can I tell you how much I did not care about making better ways to sell furniture to people? But when I got that job, I became enamored with the various fabrics and the ways some of them felt or looked on different pieces of furniture, or in the construction methods of various competitors. And I became enamored with the people whose problems I was solving with the perfect sofa for a space they couldn't find a sofa to fit in, or a chair that could help lift a person who struggled to get out of their chair. I ramped up as quickly as I could on domain knowledge. I would do research, I would read books, I would ask other experts, I would visit other furniture stores, the history of the brand that I was working for, and all of a sudden, I could be a credible person in the room who could contribute to the conversation that people were having around the business because other people knew that I cared and understood about the industry and about what was happening within that domain. Conduct excellent research. Build credibility through your research. Become a better writer. It is essential these days that you are able to communicate succinctly by writing. So whatever that looks like for you, whether that's taking a writing course or doing some daily practice journal, whatever it is, writing and documentation are quick and easy ways to stand out from everyone else. Writing is thinking. Don't let ChatGPT do that for you. And the last thing here is find a mentor. It doesn't exactly have to be a UX mentor or a software engineering mentor or a cinematography mentor, although that certainly helps. It helps to find a mentor who you can look up to and admire within your sphere of influence. I believe it is the fastest way to grow is with a mentor. If it's not someone within your knowledge domain or within your industry, it can be really helpful to have someone who can at least be an accountability coach, who cares about your growth and who cares about your career trajectory. Find a mentor, find a coach. The last two things I want to talk about. Number one is working from within. It is just true that if we do not have health, and balance, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, our ability to work with others and our ability to put people over process suffers. So take care of yourself. Take care of your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, because your work is going to reflect what's coming from within. In GIT, we care. I care about all of you going off to be great and wonderful creative professionals who maybe become brighter than all of us someday. But what matters more is that the work you create comes from within all of you. And good teams care about that. Good hiring managers care about that. And the very last thing is likely something we've all heard and maybe even said a couple of times. I try to make it a point in my work here at ASU with all of you and even in my personal life to work with the garage door up. Get comfortable with what you can do. Get comfortable with who you are and show it. Apart from finding yourself a mentor or a coach, this is the other quickest way you're going to level up. Just keep doing it. Out in the open. Invite critique and feedback. What do you think? How can we make this better? How can I be better at this? You don't have to prove anything. Just work with the garage door up. Invite other people to do it. You're going to come across a lot of people in this industry who don't like to work with the garage door up. And you know what? It's holding them back. And it'll hold you back too. So what's at the core of that? Insecurity, sometimes pride, ego, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of things that can be the cause of not wanting to work with the garage door up. So when you're balanced and healthy in all of those different ways, you can be more authentic and true, and you can work with the garage door up because you want to be better. Because you want the people around you to be better. You want it to be better for your customers. You want it to be better for your users. You want it to be better for your community. When you invite others into your process, your work becomes better. But only if you put people over process. That's it for today, everyone. A pretty short but hopefully impactful lecture. You've reached the end of the Module 4 lectures. Congratulations. But don't celebrate too quickly. You have a rather large and hopefully through the context of this lecture, a very meaningful assignment ahead of you. I'm sure you all will knock that out of the park, and I'll see you all when we start our final module for this class in Module 5.